Kimberly Council. I'm running for Brooklyn Borough President.
Okay. And why are you running for Brooklyn Borough President?
Uh,
It's a loaded question.
I know. It's like I keep getting the same question. Okay. So during this pandemic, our government has allocated resources to largely to people who need them the least. And as a result, the people who have the least have sacrificed the most. So your zip code should not dictate the quality of your life. And I will use the office of borough president to map out the geographic inequities of our borough and use discretionary funding and the bully pulpit to dismantle the geographic inequalities in Brooklyn.
Okay. Obviously, that's a huge task because, like you said, this has kind of exacerbated every single issue because of the pandemic. But first, I'm just giving you an idea of your background. So where in Brooklyn are you from? What are your ties to Brooklyn?
I was born and bred in Brooklyn. Grew up in Bed-Stuy, lived in Brownsville for a time. Worship in Crown Heights. Have worshipped in Crown Heights all of my life, and I currently reside with my son and daughter in Cypress Hills.
Okay, so you've pretty much been all over. Do you? That is beneficial to somebody who wants to be borough president because Brooklyn is. I know people say it's Queens, but I think Brooklyn is the most diverse borough.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, when I was in college, my nickname was Miss Brooklyn.
Very cool. Okay. Talk to me a little bit about the first thing you would do if you were elected second unit Borough Hall. What is your number one priority?
My number one priority is housing, affordable housing. Right now, over half of Brooklyn is rent burdened. And we've got to figure out a way to right size what's happening in our housing market. I'm very concerned about what's going to happen post-pandemic when this moratorium on eviction expires. So we've got to figure out how we make new developments 60% affordable, how we're making sure that seniors have enough affordable housing. And this is something that I've done. As the president of East Brooklyn Housing Development Corporation, we built over 900 units of affordable housing in East Brooklyn. And as the secretary of the board of directors of the Berean Community Family Life Center, we sold our parking lot and worked out a plan to build 107 units of affordable housing, and we managed 77 units of senior housing. So I've done the work and want to bring that to Borough Hall.
How do you create affordable housing in an area of Brooklyn where there's a desperate need also just for money to be coming into the neighborhood? So I use Sunset Park as an example. Right now, obviously, there's an 80-20 split, and affordable housing is based off an AMI that is pretty skewed. So how do you go about making sure that money is flowing through the borough, the economy is working the way it should be, but also people can stay living?
So there's a couple of things that need to happen, and these things are not disconnected, they're interconnected. We've got to support small businesses. We've got to create incentives that would allow them to survive because they are revenue generators and they also employ the most people. We've also got to rethink how, we've got to fully fund NYCHA, and I'm excited that Congresswoman Velasquez has introduced the bill to put money back into New York City housing. We do not need to privatize that in any way, but we've also got to think about, how do we create jobs and industries around our public housing? And as far as how do you do that, there's so many different creative approaches. We can empower community-based organizations. I would definitely have an office and a staff set up specifically to work with community-based organizations to help them to develop affordable housing and take it out of the hands so much of developers, but let it be something that goes from the bottom up and not the top down. Get the community involved in how they'd like to see these things happen.
Okay. Rezoning projects are also rampant around Brooklyn, and a lot of times people try to tie in affordable housing with those projects and then they let them go through. Mm-hmm. As borough president, you would have not a final say, but a defining say, I'd say, in rezoning projects as they go through the ULURP process. So what are you looking for in a rezoning proposal that would make you want to pass it, make you endorse the plan?
Well, here's the other thing. Again, you don't lead from the top down. You got to lead from the bottom up. Oftentimes, we have all these closed door meetings and then you present your plan to the public. No, the public needs to be involved. The community needs to be involved in this process from the very beginning. Communities need to have a say in the projects and new developments that want to come into their communities, so that we don't have this push pull, but that they're involved in the planning and in the process of that from the beginning. So ULEP needs to be way more transparent, and that's something that I would work to have happen. But I mean, and again, when we talk about upzoning, downzoning, it has to be what the community desires and what's best for that community.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit to crime. Obviously, this past summer, we saw a huge spike in crime, and that was a culmination of many different issues in one. So how do you, going into next summer, where crime rates normally spike, prevent a spike like we saw last summer?
Police officers have to police. And we have to rebuild trust within our communities. People in community know where crime is happening and how things are happening. So there's got to be a better partnership between the police and the communities. But that starts with NYPD, because right now what's happening is, in certain communities, CPR stands for courtesy, professionalism, and respect. In other communities, it stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. We've got to change that model. And so, there are a lot of different things that we also have to put money and resources into preventive programs. We completely defunded SYEP, and then we threw a little bit of money in it for certain zip codes. We have got to employ our kids. We've got to make sure that they are engaged. We've got to put money into youth development programs, extracurricular activities. Again, these things are not disconnected, they're interconnected.
You wrote that you also support, you didn't use the word defunding, so I'm not trying to use that word or force it upon you in any way, but shifting, I guess, resources from the police to maybe organizations that are more equipped, say, for domestic violence calls. Can you talk about that a little bit, that plan?
Definitely. I think, well, we start with the fact that Senator Kevin Parker has already introduced legislation to take away mental health response from NYPD. I think NYPD is overburdened. They respond to everything, and that's not fair to them. So we've got to figure out how we can take away certain responses from NYPD. And we've got to figure out, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
That's okay. Oh, we're just talking about shifting resources within NYPD.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. So we definitely need to go line by line through that budget, and not just NYPD's budget, but the entire city's budget, because we know that we're going to be facing a deficit because of COVID. So we've got to see where we can trim the fat, and then reallocate those resources to, DYCD, summer youth employment, social service programs, mental health initiatives. So we've got to spread the love.
Okay. Shifting again to talking about healthcare. Obviously, the whole world was taken aback by the pandemic, but Brooklyn kind of became ground zero for hospitals that were understaffed, underfunded. They didn't have the resources that they needed. How do we go from here?
It is so unfortunate that your zip code does dictate the quality of care that you receive. So you have neighborhoods that are almost in a desert when it comes to healthcare. My church, which is in Crown Heights, borderline Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, when St. Mary's Hospital was shut down, we turned our parsonage into a clinic. So we've got to make sure that we are properly funding and resourcing our hospitals and our healthcare systems. I hate to share that I lost my dad to COVID in April. And I grappled with where to take him and how to treat him. I did not want to take him to the hospital that we were zoned for, because I did not think that they were resourced enough to give him the quality of care that would have had a different outcome. So we've got to fix that formula.
So sorry that happened. I didn't want to interrupt you because obviously, but I'm so sorry. Obviously that makes all of this even more important going forward, specifically for women's healthcare. A lot of the time we've talked about new moms. There's a total discrepancy in childcare programs that, because the city doesn't provide childcare, women are suffering because of it. They can't go to work. And a lot of people are concerned that after the pandemic ends, there's going to be a huge steps back for women in our city, because they are either unemployed or they've been forced to stay home to make sure that someone is with the kids. So where do you stand on that and making sure that women are supported in Brooklyn?
So Here's the thing, like there's a report that came out that I felt like a gut punch to learn that Black and Latino women were almost 100% discriminated against when it came to being laid off and losing employment and losing their jobs during this pandemic. We cannot allow that to continue. And so again, I would use the bully pulpit of Borough Hall and use as an opportunity to have conversations with small business owners and business owners. When you disenfranchise women, you impoverish the entire family. So we've got to begin to have these conversations, these hard conversations that we may not want to have about, how do we empower communities and not disenfranchise entire swaths of the community. I mean, like even people right now who are first responders who have to be concerned, they have to go to work and they have to figure out what they're doing with their children in the midst of everything that is going on. So we can't penalize women for having children because society would not exist without that. So we have to figure out how we turn this thing around.
What would it mean, and why is it right now the right moment to have a female borough president of Brooklyn? Because you would be the first.
Women legislate differently. And we've seen that with Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins. We've seen that with Tish James. And so when